A show that will change internet radio as you know it.
Okay, so let's talk about the story, which I think is hilarious. I'm just going to refer to it as the poop plane because, like, what else are you going to call it? But there was this plane, okay? It took off. It's the British Airways. They were going to Dubai. I have a hard time pronouncing that one.
It was British
anyway,
Airways? It wasn't Jet. It wasn't Jet Poo?
It wasn't.
Couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
I like it. This story, if we've ever had a story that is up our alley, it's this one. It's bathroom humor up from front to back of the airplane, apparently. They had to turn around to go back to Heathrow because they said the smelly poo in the toilet became unbearable for passing, and it was so bad. They decided it's so bad that they had to turn around and go back rather than continue their flight. They decided that there wasn't enough breeze, there wasn't enough anything to handle this.
Maybe they should see a doctor. Is there a GoFundMe for this guy?
It must be a woman, because a woman's going to be mortified and embarrassed. If this is a guy, you know that he's like out there on Twitter and everything else saying, dude, I took down an airplane with how bad that I laid it down.
There wasn't a woman who flew on Jet Poo. She ate so many burritos she didn't know what to do.
So we turned the plane around because they made a big stink. We've just made it into a haiku at the end, but there had to be something.
Real Serious Nonsense, Mondays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, now on K98 Talk.
K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level, or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com. K98Talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98Talk.com.
Republicans recommend FTR Radio to everyone they know. The other four are rhinos. FTR Radio, online at FTRradio.com. FTR Radio salutes some of the great Democrat presidents in the radio era. FTR Radio.
You're listening to Liz and Taylor.
Alright, so why can't I get another tattoo? Come on.
Because you get another tattoo, then you start talking another gun.
But not the movie star. The battling duo from the Right War on FTR Radio.
Oh, come on.
You're the one who said it.
That was a joke, partially.
Enlist in the Right War. Won't cost you nothing. Not as good as military service. But it's got to count for something, right?
Good evening, folks. Thank you for listening to FTR Radio. I'm Liz Harrison. This is The Right War. No, Taylor still is not here, but yes, I do have Jason Pye. But because I already did it on the show post, I'm going to start here. The disclaimer.
We need that.
Yes, we need that because we don't have adult supervision tonight, as I had observed on the Twitter. So, Jason and I are speaking only for ourselves, not for our employers or VLR, FTR, anybody else out there who could possibly say that we would ever speak for them in the first place.
That's right.
We are just speaking for ourselves. That's it, folks.
And only ourselves.
Only ourselves. Yep.
Or Jack Daniels, if Jack Daniels happens to be involved. Then we're speaking for Jack Daniels.
How about Jim Beam?
Or Jim Beam. I always forget that. I always forget you're a Jim Beam drinker. Why? How do I forget that?
I have no idea.
Are you down on some Jim Beam tonight?
Yes, I am. I haven't in a while. I decided, you know what? I'm going to be on the air with Jason. I'm going to have some Jim Beam.
So tonight, my wife was telling me, because we're doing this like whole low carb diet. It's keto, KETO, and you're after about 2 weeks of doing it, your body goes into what they call ketosis. So we stay around 20 carbs or less every day, and I was just lamenting about the lack of beer, because I can't drink beer on a low carb diet. And she's like, actually, you can drink Michelob Ultra, which it's like 90 calories and has 2.6 carbs in it. So I'm not drinking it tonight, but I may next week because I bought a 6-pack tonight to give it a try. And so next week, if all goes well, I'll be throwing back some Mich Ultra while I'm on the air.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but somebody told me that it is not entirely dissimilar from MGD, whatever that means.
Yeah, I haven't had MGD since I was probably like 22 years old. So it was like one of the first beers I tried, and I hated it. But that was also, I was 22 and had just started drinking, so that probably explains it more than anything else. My tastes for beer they always say it's an acquired taste, and of course it is, and I acquired that taste. And Prairie Dog says its Ultra is water beer. So basically it's like Bud Light and PBR. Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's better than whiskey. Knocks me out for like 2 days, so beer is a lot easier on my system. So.
Yeah, I can't do the beer. Well, I was raised on whiskey, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I wasn't really raised on anything. Like, there was no alcohol in my house when I was a kid growing up. I never saw my parents drink. I've only seen my mom drink like twice, and after like one glass of wine, she's done. She can't drink anything else.
Oh my.
Yeah. So
my mom liked wine, but she couldn't drink it, and she decided that she figured out a way around it. She made jelly.
Oh.
It boiled the alcohol off, but it still tasted like the wine, and she'd have it on crackers with cheese.
Huh. That's neat. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was just add a little bit of sugar and basically Sure gel, and then boil it down and put it in a jar, and there you go.
Huh. Like, must be it's like I don't know, something that she picked up from, like, through family, or was it just something she did on her own, or what?
She did it on her own. She used to can a lot. We would grow mint in the yard, and she'd make mint jelly. We would go out in the wilds in the hillsides here and collect blackberries and elderberries, and she'd make blackberry and elderberry jellies and jams. So, yeah, I grew up that you go down in the basement, and there were these shelves over the wash tubs at the bottom of the stairs, and they'd be filled with stewed tomatoes and jellies, and yeah.
Well, we have a lot to talk about tonight, you know.
We do?
We do.
Oh, okay.
We have like 2 or 3 things that have been on my radar the last couple of days. You texted me the other day and said be thinking of stuff to talk about, so I have some things to talk about.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually paid attention to something other than criminal justice reform for a week, so you should be proud of me. Yeah. So obviously Rand Paul has announced for president.
Yep.
And my line all along since coming on board at FreedomWorks is that he adds a lot to the discussion. I mean, you have 2 Republicans who have announced that they're running, him and Paul and Ted Cruz. You're gonna have others who come down the line. Paul's rollout has been pretty interesting because of his speech. His announcement speech was very good. And then he kind of stepped in it the next day with a contentious interview. I think it was on one of the morning shows where he appeared to kind of tell a reporter how to do her job. It was a female reporter. Now he's being accused of sexism again.
Yeah, wasn't it Savannah Guthrie?
I think that was her name, yeah. And because he also had that that run-in with that CNBC reporter back a couple months ago where he shushed her when she was trying to talk over him. And then he also had the abortion discussion with a reporter who asked him about his position on abortion, and he basically cut the reporter off and said, "Why don't you ask Debbie Wasserman Schultz what her position on abortion is? Does she believe a 7-pound baby in the womb, can be aborted?" I don't know. I mean, I've watched it kind of from a distance and not really saying much about it because FreedomWorks at this point is not going to get involved in the presidential race. But we're very excited about some of the candidates who are coming out, and we see our activists going to probably one of four, being spread out across 4 candidates: Paul, Cruz, Carson, and Walker. But with Paul coming out, what's your reaction to how he's entered the race so far?
Well, I try really hard not to pay attention to the speech for one very big reason. Every time that somebody decides to run for the presidency, they sit there and they come up with a list of issues that they feel will resonate with the American public. And this is like the Luntz moment. They'll sit there and try to figure out, okay, what resonates with this audience that I have sitting in front of me? What is going to be something that I'm going to stick with for at least a large part of the campaign? So it's filed under, I'm going to be more worried about what they stick with as opposed to what they said at the beginning. I hope that makes sense. But as far as Rand Paul and the whole female issue,
yeah.
Paging Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He needs to appear on news with somebody other than a liberal talking head.
Well, I think he was on Megyn Kelly's show last night, wasn't he? And she kind of came at him a little bit about his interview style. And the thing is, Paul conceded that he has a bit of a thin skin, and you've been a senator for 4 years now, and you have before that you ran for office for at least a year, if not longer. So and before that he was involved in his father's presidential campaign. So he's been on the media radar since at least 2007. So we're going on 8 years now.
Well, if he behaved himself with Megyn Kelly, then my argument might be that, maybe he just doesn't like liberal women.
Maybe that's the case. I don't know, but it's just. But he conceded that he lets things get under his skin sometimes. That's bad for. I mean, like, you've been doing this for 8 years now. I don't really know if that's an excuse anymore. I mean, and this is one of the few criticisms I have of Paul is, and as you know, as we've discussed before, I'm a big fan of his. But it's kind of concerning to me that you have a guy who hasn't even, he's gone under some criticism, mostly from the hard right, the foreign policy hawks in the Republican Party, who constantly criticize him for his views on foreign policy, often falsely smearing him as an isolationist. But he hasn't gone through the kind of rigorous vetting by the mainstream media that the presidential candidates get when they come on the national scene. Paul's been on the national scene for a long time, but it's because of his uniqueness, not because he was a presidential candidate. He's still a unique figure, but he's on the national stage as a presidential candidate, and everything in his past, everything his father said, everything that you could possibly imagine is not going to be on the table. And so far, I'm a little nervous because he's not handling the criticism that well.
Right. Yeah, and I'm really not going to be for him as a presidential candidate unless he breaks with the standard whenever it comes to presidential candidates and chooses somebody be it a Condoleezza Rice, even though I'm ambivalent about her even, or somebody who, I hate saying his name too, but somebody handpicked by a Dick Cheney, not Dick Cheney himself.
Sure.
And say, this is going to be my go-to man on, or woman, on foreign policy. Because whoever gets involved in this, regardless of their ideology and their general beliefs and everything else, we have a hearty mess to fix, and you cannot run on what Rand Paul has been out there saying forever and win. It's just not going to happen.
Not on most of the issues, no. I mean, well, on many of the issues, no. I mean, some of the things he said do have broader appeal, but I mean, his positions on social issues are they're going to scare away some moderate voters, because when it all comes down to it, he's still, and I'm not saying the Republican nominee has to support gay marriage. I'm not saying that. He does think it's more of a state's right to decide whether they want to allow gay marriage or not. And, you know, that's probably an acceptable position to many Republicans, perhaps, and probably not many social conservatives. But some of the issues he's staked his ground on are not really going to resonate too much with the American public in a presidential campaign. Criminal justice reform, for example, is a very important issue. It is to me, but that's not something that's very sexy. It may appeal to some new voters, like minorities and maybe some young people. His positions on the war on drugs are very good, but at the end of the day, young voters you can't count on them to show up, and so you have to appeal. I mean, they show up for the people they believe in, but Rand Paul, although an exciting figure, although a fresh face who's saying new and interesting things, does not have the gravitas that Obama had when he came on the scene, and he doesn't have the oratory. He's not a very good orator. No. He's a decent speech giver, but he's not on the same level as President Obama. So those things. So those are his shortcomings. But at the same time, he is saying some things that are very different. It's just whether those things are going to resonate. I'm just not sure they will. But yeah, I mean, that's just my 2 cents. But at the same time, I love the guy. I mean, I hope he does well.
If you deliver the message properly, I could see someone making it to the White House on criminal justice reform and a strong foreign policy campaign.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah,
and just on those two issues, but you have to do it in a spiderweb kind of way.
Yeah.
Number one, on the criminal justice reform, to make it resonate with older voters, which is going to be the issue. You need to focus heavily on the cost of our current levels of individuals in incarceration. You have to go there.
Right.
And, of course, civil asset forfeiture is going to be a major issue for a lot of older voters, particularly business owners.
Right.
We have seen the business owners that ended up on the Hill testifying about how they have been essentially screwed by the government.
I got to talk to one of them this week too.
Right. So that's something that would resonate with not only younger voters but older voters as well. And as far as foreign policy goes, we need to see somebody who's smart enough to sit there and stop saying that this is a battle to stop terror, Bush style, you know.
Yeah.
Stamp it out wherever it is. No, it's going and making the point that we need to remain the island that is generally unaffected. And the only way to do that is to fight the battle over there so that we don't have to fight it here, a la World War II, FDR, etc. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The arguments that we saw for World War I and World War II are going to be very useful now if somebody's smart enough to use them.
Yeah. You mentioned a potential vice presidential pick. Let's say Rand Paul gets a nomination. Who would you like to see as a vice presidential pick?
I'd like to see Rand Paul as the vice presidential pick and then
Ted
Cruz.
Oh, well, a lot of people are saying that on Facebook. I don't see that happening.
No, I don't either. I mean, you're talking dream here.
Right.
But I'm only saying that because you're talking about the whole idea. People buy the image and they buy the
sure.
snazzy speech and everything. And honestly, at this point, the man who's got the smooth talk is Ted Cruz.
No, and this is the thing, going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of Rand's approach to interviews, his interview style, and being very combative with the press. I wonder what it's going to be like in some of these debates, because they're going to come after him, and if he loses his demeanor on stage, it's going to come back and bite him in the ass in the polls.
Maybe.
No, it will. I mean, because he's going to be ganged up upon. I mean, these like Jeb Bush and Scott Walker and some of these other guys and Marco Rubio, who do have more of a hawkish foreign policy. They're gonna gang up on him.
Well, it depends on how he does it. I mean, if he can figure out a way to do it by degrees, meaning that initially when they start poking, he sits there and says, just keep the conversation on, okay, you're going to focus on this while we have to deal with that. In other words, doing a Ronald Reagan. Why are you concerned with this when the country is really concerned with that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As long as he keeps it on that level, even if he does end up losing his temper, as long as it ended up being a difference of degree, like in other words, you start poking the bear and the bear starts getting annoyed.
Right.
You keep poking the bear, and the bear decides to smack your head off. In other words, as long as it's reasonable, and it's getting down to the point where he is coming off as a human being who is just literally fed up with these peons that are hanging around him and pushing buttons on him personally, as opposed to focusing on what matters to the voters, it might not hurt him.
Maybe you're right.
As long as he keeps it, that he's not upset, as long as he keeps the message going, that he's not upset about them poking at him personally, per se. He is like, oh, no, you're hurting my feels. As long as it's not that.
Right.
And he's sitting there saying, hey, stupid, nobody gives a damn about me. They give a damn about this.
Right, right.
As long as he keeps the dialogue there, he could be all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things, like especially in terms of foreign policy, it's going to be really difficult to explain in a 1 minute to 1.5 minute answer during the course of a debate with 15 candidates on stage. Assuming there are that many that come out, I think some of the people who've been talked about are ultimately not going to run because they're just going to get lost in the shuffle. But it's
Carly
it's
Fiorina and
right.
What? The Dawn.
Santorum, Huckabee, those two may run. I don't think both of them are going to run. I think Santorum's time has come and gone. Huckabee, I think, runs again, though.
Huckabee's going to run again because he just came up even with Hillary.
Right. I don't know. It's just there are a lot of nuances in Rand's foreign policy positions. And it's going to be very difficult when he's surrounded by people who say, let's bomb everybody, just half-heartedly. I'm joking here. Let's bomb these countries. Let's bomb Iran, a la John McCain. And then for him to say, let's go, it's going to be difficult for him to say, look, our intervention in the Middle East has constantly failed. Let me go through the history and explain to you why. Let me explain to you how the war in Iraq has put us in this position, the position we're in now, for example. That's going to be very difficult for him to pack into a 1.5-minute answer. Right. And now to mention the fact that most Republican, many if not most Republican voters still think that the decision going to Iraq was the right decision. So you're already starting out from behind.
Well, there's always the fallback on free markets.
Oh, they're always absolutely, and Rand,
and then your foreign policy. If you go and run yourself as foreign policy focused on protecting our business interests abroad,
sure,
that could be sold to libertarians easily.
Sure,
and it could also, given the circumstances and how the ISIS and other terror organizations are waging war at this point, it leaves you with a fairly free hand when it comes to going after them if need be. You aren't locking yourself into a situation like Obama has, where he says no boots on the ground when we really do need them, even if it is in a limited extent, just so that we know where to drop the bombs. I mean, let's be real. But because you need intelligence on the ground. We're not there in technology yet that you could just go and put drones out there and really know where you need to be hitting, or go and have, like moon robot type things running around on the ground. Right. We're not there. Yeah. So you need to have human intelligence on the ground in order to effectively fight. And because they have taken to technology to wage war, like today, France losing their television station to hackers that are claiming they're associated with ISIS, that changes the game. That's a game changer. Because, and even that might resonate with libertarians too, because I hate to say it, but they're just like the Occupy folks when it comes to their tech and, their gadgets and their communications and everything else. Do you think they're going to be really happy with the idea of a president that sits there and stands by and lets these idiots go and screw them out of having their access to their internet or their favorite television programs because it got hacked?
Sure. I don't know. I don't know. I'm thinking, and by the way, Lunatic Rex is sitting here saying that he's trying to convince me to say something negative about Rand on the air. I have been sitting here for the last 15 minutes and criticizing Rand's approach to the presidential race so far. I think I'm criticizing Rand, or saying negative things. Or perhaps they're more out of concern. I don't know, but cut me some slack.
Yeah. He's not like me. Paulites scare me.
Well, I'm not that's one of the things you could I'll say about me is I voted for Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012, but I was not frequently critical, but often critical of a lot of the things he said and did, as well as the things that he had been tied to in the past, such as the newsletters, for example. And I'm not a Paulista. I like a lot of things Ron Paul says. I probably agree with him on 85% of stuff. I like a lot of things Rand says, and probably agree with him on 90% of the stuff. But they are not infallible people, and they, as I've been sitting here pointing out for the last 15 minutes. So they can and should be criticized when they do something wrong or do something stupid.
Oh, definitely.
And I don't know if you've watched on the Facebooks or the Twitters the last couple days, the dynamic that's it's been there for a while, but you're seeing a lot of the ardent Ron Paul, the people who shout Ron Paul 2016 constantly, who are criticizing Rand and, threatening to write in Ron Paul or vote for somebody else or not vote at all. The whole thing's it's really funny to watch this kind of dynamic be out there. So good times.
Yeah. I'm just picking on one of our hosts over on the FTR or VLR because he's picking on me via Facebook chat.
And Lunatic Rex, you didn't offend me, man. Takes a lot to offend me. Takes a lot to offend me. More than what you did, sir.
Yeah.
So, and there's also this whole thing going on in South Carolina, in Charleston.
Yeah. I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up.
Oh no! Come on!
Right.
I mean, you asked me to find topics. I found you topics. These are the two topics I picked. We could talk about other things. We could talk more about civil asset forfeiture because that's a fun subject.
No, that's all right.
So South Carolina?
Yeah.
You got to tell me how because you and I we've discussed Ferguson. We've discussed the Garner death in New York, and I think we can safely say that based on everything we know, Ferguson was not what it was made out to be. The Garner killing in New York should have been prosecuted. This police officer in Charleston has been charged with murder, and in my opinion, deservedly so.
This one in South Carolina is a nightmare.
It is. Yeah. Because it's everything that Ferguson was claimed to be.
Exactly. It definitely is, and I am hoping that they throw the book at this one. I'm hoping it ends up a slam dunk. Of course, on MSNBC earlier they were saying it may not be, and that bothers me. But I think they're putting way too much faith in the concept of people, particularly juries, falling on the side of police, especially after Ferguson and Garner and so many other things that have been going on. I mean, you can't go on Facebook without seeing video of police brutality one way or another. I mean, granted, a lot of it is recycled from God knows when, but this is going back to something that I've been really annoyed with, and your dad would probably have had words about it too at one point. And I know that officers that I've known for many years have. Basically, we have a problem when it comes to how our police behave now. And I don't know what the root of it is, whether it is a fear of litigation like just about everything else out there, or just a flat out, we're going to be stupid deal and treat everybody as though they are potential felons and quit doing your job and trying to know your community, know your territory, know the people that live there, and treat the people who are decent, law-abiding citizens, or at least somewhat close to that, the way they should be treated, and that is with respect. I mean, you don't treat everybody like a potential thug. That's where we're at this point.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of those things, and for those of you who don't know, my father was a police officer in Atlanta, in Forest Park, which is a town just outside of Atlanta, for about 10 years, I think. He did that after he served in the military. But it concerns me, and certainly not all cops are bad people or bad at their jobs or go out of their way to look and just to make people into criminals. They don't treat everybody who they see walk past them on the street as a criminal. Although I will say, from my experience playing music, I did have run-ins with cops, and I wasn't one of these. I played in a punk rock band, so there's that whole thing about punk rock kids and cops not getting along. I dressed like a normal guy. I wore band t-shirts and jeans. I didn't have weird-looking hair, and I didn't. I took showers regularly. So like these are not. I wasn't your stereotypical punk rock kid. I didn't even skateboard or anything like that. At least I stopped after I was 15. But But there are police officers out there like this, and the guy in this, I forget his name, but the guy in South Carolina is probably one of the more. I think it's
Slager.
Slager, yeah, he's one of the more egregious examples. But there are certainly cops who do go out of their way to mess with people. And
well, Becca observed in the chat room that the video doesn't necessarily show everything. The family apparently told MSNBC, or someone, it was reported on MSNBC, that the man in question had been nervous about police because he had been behind in child support payments, which could have caused him to end up in jail.
Sure.
So Being pulled over in a routine traffic stop, of course, when you know that you could be in trouble for something else, obviously caused him to act at least a little bit out of the ordinary for this officer. But I'm sorry, that's a huge stretch. It really is.
Right, and to Becca's point, yes, we don't know all the details. The video does tell us a lot. I'm not saying the video is definitive, but it does tell us a lot. And the things I saw in the video, which I've seen yesterday, I think I watched it 5 or 6 times just to get the full story of what was going on, at least in that clip of in the video clip. But I mean, the guy, he was running away. You fire 8 shots. You hit him 5 times?
Yeah, and the other thing that disturbed... Why didn't you just
aim for his damn leg if you wanted to bring him down?
Yeah, and the other thing that disturbed me very badly, well, there are a couple things. Number one, the officer went back...
Picked
up something off the ground and put it near the victim.
Right.
And he cuffed the victim, and it did not make any attempt to render aid at all.
And they said, well, his partner supposedly said that he... or I don't know which one gave the report, but supposedly the partner said that he had administered CPR. Obviously, he didn't, based on what we saw in the video. The guy died at the scene. And if they tried to resuscitate him, it was probably not during based on what we've seen, it wasn't during in the video. I don't know, man. And the one thing, and I don't know which degree of murder he was charged with. Has anybody heard? Have you heard, Liz?
No, I haven't heard yet. I'm going to bet that they're going to go on, depending upon how their laws are set up, second degree or manslaughter, and they may opt for both. In other words, basically leaving the jury with the option of convicting on a lesser charge. But, I don't see them going with first degree.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't premeditated. I mean, the guy didn't...
Right.
Plan this...
Actually, premeditation is theoretically an option. Because, given the certain situation... given certain situations, and there is a higher standard held for law enforcement officers, they could argue that. They really could. It's definitely definitely something that is an issue. But if he had been in a traffic stop and he ran from the scene of it, if the man had been searched at all, if there is a witness that comes forward and says that they saw him patted down, this is really, really bad, and that definitely would leave an opening for first-degree murder.
Yeah.
Because the officer, if he had patted him down and had verified that he had been unarmed, then that is premeditated murder of an individual who is unarmed, at least as far as a police officer is concerned. I could hear my cousin saying it. I could hear my husband's uncle saying that, and his son, and my husband's uncle was a police chief, and his son is a member of a special tactical force here in Pennsylvania, the state level, basically state level SWAT. So, that's just really ugly, and the cousin is probably almost breathing a sigh of relief to a certain extent over this case, because they had something where they had shot somebody who was unarmed, but they had no way of knowing that he was unarmed. The individual was acting like they were armed, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And they were under investigation for a shooting there. And that's a totally different ballgame. And they did have somebody who had a body cam, at least I think they did. So they were able to show, the attitude was there at least.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, did you have you seen the clips of James Clyburn? He was on MSNBC this morning on the Morning Joe, and he was discussing what happened in Charleston. He actually blamed it on ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and basically indicated that stand your ground laws and things like that were responsible for what happened. And,
no.
No, I mean, it's
that's
obviously
not the case.
No, obviously not the case at all. And he also compared he didn't make the outright comparison, but he came pretty close. He basically indicated that the Koch brothers are the same as the KKK.
I'm tired of hearing it.
I know. I am too, but it's worth discussing because now this stuff's getting thrown into this whole thing as well, and it's what the left does.
Right. I mean, I'm no huge fan of ALEC myself, but if only because I'm not a fan of boilerplate legislation for the varied states. Because I'm sorry. No, you have different circumstances. I can only go for it from the perspective. I mean, it's the same deal as what we had when we had the federal building standards come down, and you had states sit there and literally adopt them wholesale without even really looking at them, and it just caused all manner of hell because those laws are written in such a way that they cover they either don't cover it to meet the specific needs of the state, or they are written in such a way that you need to really wade through them and pick and choose what you really need, and your legislators may or may not do that.
Well, I don't have a problem with boilerplate legislation because ultimately a lot of most state legislatures are part-time. These guys, in Georgia, for example, these guys make $18,000 to work for about 4 straight months, actually passing laws, and then they do constituent services the remainder of the year and occasional hearings. I don't have a problem with it because a lot of times they have to go through legislative council, which crafts the laws or crafts the bills that they want to put forward. Sometimes legislative council is not doesn't really take their concerns into account or doesn't exactly get the idea of what they want to do across in the legislation itself. So whereas ALEC does, now it's up to the legislator to make sure that what they're introducing is needed for the state or addresses the needs of the state. But in terms of ALEC, I don't have a problem with what they do.
I said, it goes back to the laziness of legislators who may or may not do their jobs and just wholesale take what ALEC offers against even ALEC's advice. That's why I have issues with them. It's not so much what they do, but the end result of what they're producing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it encourages laziness in a certain way. I almost wish, and I'm not entirely sure how they do it now, because this had been suggested, I know, personally, by at least a few legislators here in Pennsylvania, and I imagine they weren't alone. But they were asking for certain bills and certain things to come from ALEC in form like you would have in architecture, where they'll sit there and say, oh, you can take this and this and this and build a house. Like you're taking different portions and pick and choose. Like you want the 2-floor foyer, but you don't want the 4-car garage, so you go and put in an extra office or something instead of the garage. You know what I mean there?
Yeah.
Like you're just taking bits and pieces. They were saying, give it to us in bits and pieces and say, okay, this is how it is. You can sit there. So they didn't have to wade through it, but more importantly, they could just sit there and say, okay, we only need this, so we don't need this whole big bill. We could just do this as a basic resolution or a rider on another bill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that I don't have a problem with, because when you're dealing with just bits and pieces and you have to build it like a Lego building, then there's a better chance that they're actually going to pay attention to what the heck they're doing and not do a you've got to pass it to know what's in it type deal.
Sure. Well, and you were talking about the general. It's funny you say that because you were talking about the general laziness of legislators, and in Georgia, as I explained, we have. I think Pennsylvania, you have a full-time legislature. Is that right?
Yeah, we're full-time.
Right. So Georgia part-time. It runs from the second Monday in January through usually the end of March, early April, sometimes stretching into late April. Excluding special sessions that could be called. But these guys, they have to pack in all this legislation over the course of 40 days. And usually a lot of the big legislation, a lot of the controversial legislation comes in the final 10 days. And they pack hundreds of bills into this 10 days, especially the last 2 days, where after day 40 they can't do anything. So a lot of bad and controversial legislation gets passed through because these guys don't have time to read the bills when they're going through 100 bills on a given day. And sometimes bad legislation gets passed. There were 2 examples of that in Georgia just this past week. We had a piece of legislation dealing with election law that was fairly mundane when it was originally introduced in the Senate, got chopped up, provisions added, and they were actually going to add in so-called dark money provisions that would have prevented organizations from running issue advocacy ads. No one knew it was in the bill. It passed the House. No one knew it was in the bill. I had to call legislators who are friendly, who are very conservative and libertarian-leaning, and ask them what was going on. They didn't even know it was there. And so, that's the problem, right? I mean, they're flying through bills. They have no idea what's in them. They're passing because they just want to go home. And it's a problem at the federal level too, which is why there's been read the bills legislation introduced in the past several Congresses. But the Pirates lost, or they're losing.
Yeah, the Pirates were swept by Cincinnati, so he's not real happy.
But anyway, it's one of those things that kind of frustrates me. And eventually, by the way, that bill was killed after about 20 conservative groups, including FreedomWorks, Americans for Tax Reform, a few others. I signed the letter because I'm a Georgia resident and I work for FreedomWorks. And we got those provisions taken out, and it eventually got killed in the Senate anyway. But it was, although we're going to have that fight again next year, according to the speaker. But it's one of the frustrating things because nobody reads the damn bills. Nobody knows what laws they're passing, what they're doing. They give away millions of dollars in tax credits to businesses, these crony businesses who want just free money from taxpayers or shift the tax burden to off themselves to regular taxpayers. It's just very frustrating and very irritating. And you can blame ALEC because because of what they're doing, but in general, it's just the laziness of elected officials, and that only a handful of these guys in any given state legislature or in Congress actually give a damn about what they're doing.
I know what you mean. I mean, we had it here. I ended up defending a Democrat over going overseas to see maglev rail system.
Yeah.
Because they were yelling, and maglev was hammering Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, D.C., and New York. They were trying really hard for a long time there to loop together Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York City, and then have an outlying station somewhere in Jersey, probably Newark, and D.C. They wanted to have, high-speed rail. And this legislator was on the Transportation Committee forever, practically. And they went and said, well, you got to come and see what we have. And he said, okay, where is it? And there's nothing in the States. Nothing. Maglev does not have anything. I mean, they have some small stuff, but nothing that would meet anything remotely close to the project that they wanted to do as far as, connecting all of those major cities. So what's the point of going and seeing a low-speed maglev project somewhere here? I believe they had it in Seattle area, or out in the Northwest somewhere they had something small. That doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't show you what it is. So he had to go to Spain And we had all these taxpayers who were calling into these talk shows and flipping out. And I called the talk show host and I said, will you please stop it? Because he was taking their side. And I said, just stop. And he says, what? And I said, hey, do these people and do you understand that there isn't any maglev high-speed rail system in the United States or in Canada or in Mexico or in anywhere in North or South America? It doesn't exist.
Right.
The only place they have it is in Europe. And in point of fact, Spain, where this man went, was the cheapest place he could go. He was able to get the cheapest flight. He flew out of Cleveland because he didn't want to get screwed with the flight rules going out of Pittsburgh. It was cheaper for him to fly from Harrisburg to Cleveland instead of being even driving from Pittsburgh to Cleveland. It would have been more expensive because gas prices were high at the time.
Yeah.
So he flew from Harrisburg to Cleveland and then flew from Cleveland to Spain. And that was cheaper by far. I mean, it saved the taxpayers easily $1,500 minimum just on his ticket alone, never mind the 2 staffers he had to take with him. So...
But he did. This wasn't a junket or anything. He just
no.
Oh, okay.
No, it was paid out of the Transportation Committee.
Okay.
But it was a legitimate fact-finding mission, quote unquote, because they had a bill.
Yeah.
They had a bill. It was sitting there. It was under consideration. It would have involved a lot of property purchases by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and by, obviously, New York and New Jersey and Maryland and D.C. It would have been a big nightmare.
And a lot of freaking taxpayer dollars because the maglev is not cheap.
No, it isn't. And but the thing was, the maglev was so hard on getting into the market and all of that, they were making a really good offer. I mean, as far as they were getting corporate backing for a lot of the project, which would have arguably saved the taxpayers a lot of money, but
it didn't
happen.
They've been talking about putting I say they have been. There's one state legislator in Georgia who's been talking about putting a maglev line from Atlanta to Chattanooga. He's like in love with the idea. I think he's like Taylor and thinks about it at night. So,
oh God. Yeah, you had to get in the Taylor dig.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I'm not opposed to it, and honestly, I understand there are a lot of people who sit there and say taxpayer dollars, but when you're talking about a major project of that kind, you really do need to have government at least be the impetus to start it. But you do also need to have a real financial plan once it has started. Because let's be honest, I mean, I hate saying it this way, but as long as they're not sitting there saying, okay, we're going to run this rail system right through a major urban center and we're just going to screw a lot of people and we're not going to even attempt to avoid heavy populated areas. We're just going to go right through them and take out a whole shitload of houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they're not being stupid about it.
Well, I think...
The government's going to get the land for a hell of a lot less, and I know eminent domain and all of that, but let's be honest, if we really do need the transportation system in the first place, and you do establish that it would help significantly our economy and trade and everything else. Government starting the project is not a bad thing in my mind.
Well,
I just don't want to see it without a program where they're going to sit there and say, but after X number of years, we already have established that X, Y, and Z corporations are going to step in and take over maintenance and all of the you know, basically steps to privatization.
Sure, this is more of a general statement, and I haven't studied maglev extensively, so I can't speak to that. And in terms of this proposal, for example, I have no idea what's there. But in general terms, looking at rail, it's kind of a boondoggle when it all comes down to it. It's not very successful. I mean, people still have an addiction to their cars, and they're going to drive them whenever they have the opportunity. It makes more sense in some cities than it does in others, but still, the vast majority of riders of transportation, the most favorite mode of transportation is vehicles.
Well, maglev was making their sale because of the fact that they had, and it was making sense for Pennsylvania because of our weather. The maglev system that they were selling apparently generates a significant amount of heat to the point where when you would normally have your roadways essentially, screwed, you wouldn't be able to get from point A to point B because of snow and ice. Maglev will still run.
The thing, also, one more thing you have to consider, and we're not just talking about taxpayers in terms of the sheer cost of taxpayers, although that's important because we spend billions and billions of dollars on a mode of transportation that doesn't get near the ridership miles that vehicles do. And I would also submit to you that a lot of these proposals are based in kind of pseudo-climate change science, that they want to change behavior to make people stop driving their cars, which emits gas into the atmosphere, at least. So there's that aspect to it of it as well. I don't know. It's just we spend. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head how much the transportation budget is, but we put all this money into the transportation budget and the Highways Trust Fund and we spend roughly 40 to 50% of federal transportation dollars on a mode of transportation that gets about a 5 to 8% ridership.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no fiscal sense whatsoever.
Well, like I said, it obviously got shot down after all was said and done. But I could understand their logic, and honestly, the environmentalists were actually ticked off about it. So,
really?
They were not big on it because it was going to go through land that they wanted to protect for the spotted owl or whatever.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, so no, it did make a lot of sense. The big problem was that they were looking at the probability of, essentially putting Amtrak completely out of play. And that wasn't going to happen.
Speaking of boondoggles.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that probably would have been a good thing in and of itself.
Right.
The maglev rail system would have been easier to maintain than the Amtrak one. It would have been weatherproof because of heat in the winter and all of that. And because of its higher speed, it would have been, actually, it would have been quicker now than air travel between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, Pittsburgh and Newark, and Pittsburgh and D.C., because you wouldn't have the headache of the TSA involved.
Right.
At least not. You would have some security, obviously, because you have to, but it wouldn't have been as bad.
Well, they have been using. They've been putting in TSA in some transportation or train stations around the country. I remember writing in a previous job I had. I remember writing about that some. I haven't followed up on it any since then, but I know they have been expanding it somewhat. You've also seen the examples of TSA conducting random stops on highways as well.
Well, we're out of time again, Jason. We always do this.
Yep, we do.
So, of course, follow at Jace Liberty on the Twitter. We will catch you next week, and Taylor will be back. Have a great night, folks.
Bye.
Are you conservative in a world of liberal?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're not alone. Hey, I'm Daniel Stafford, host of the Stafford Voice, and I'd like to invite you to tune in each Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern, where I'll break down the events of the week, and together we'll learn about how they affect you. So, sit back and get ready for the good, the bad, and the ugly of talk radio right here on K98 Talk.
The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program America Off the Rails. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network. K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level, or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com.